You're listening to the Christian Post Daily Podcast. Today is Friday, July 31st. Episcopal Church Bishop Jerry Alban Lamb, who led a California diocese torn apart by the denomination's growing acceptance of homosexuality, has died at the age of 85. His daughter Kate Lamb announced on Instagram that the bishop died peacefully Sunday morning after multiple health problems, writing, "He meant a great deal to so many of us, and his impact on the world is unmeasurable." Bishop Megan Triquare of the Diocese of Northern California offered prayers of gratitude for his long life of faithful service. Born in Denver in 1940 and originally a Catholic priest, Lamb joined the Episcopal Church in 1977, led the Diocese of Northern California from 1992 to 2006, then became Provisional Bishop of San Joaquin after conservatives broke away in 2007. He supported deposing 61 breakaway clergy, calling it heartbreaking. Michigan has agreed to stop enforcing its ban on so-called conversion therapy for minors under a stipulated order, and final judgment entered Thursday in the case of Catholic Charities versus Whitmer in the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Michigan. The state will no longer enforce the law against licensed professionals who engage in therapy that consists exclusively of talking, which the court declared violates the First Amendment's free speech clause. The settlement follows the Supreme Court's 8-1 ruling in Chiles versus Salazar, where Justice Neil Gorsuch wrote that the spoken word is perhaps the quintessential form of protected speech. Beckett Senior Counsel Luke Goodrich called it a major victory for children, counselors, and common sense. Governor Gretchen Whitmer signed the 2023 ban, sponsored by Democratic State Representative Felicia Brabeck, a clinical psychologist. An Arkansas family is suing Elon Musk's xAI, demanding safeguards to prevent the creation of non-consensual sexually explicit imagery after a photographer allegedly used the Grok chatbot to generate child sexual abuse material of their 10-year-old daughter and other young clients. The suit, filed in the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Arkansas, follows the June 10th arrest of Northwest Arkansas photographer Russell Bloodworth III, charged with 200 counts of possessing and creating AI-generated child sexual abuse material. The complaint says xAI marketed Grok as less restricted, more permissive, and boundary-pushing, while adding features like spicy mode, and warns fabricated images could circulate long into her adulthood. Haley McNamara of the National Center on Sexual Exploitation said if xAI can't prevent such material, it must be shut down. xAI hasn't commented. A human rights group is pressing the United Nations to act against Iran's newest crackdown on Protestant Christians. The European Center for Law and Justice sent a letter Wednesday to the UN Human Rights Council, addressed to its president, Indonesian Ambassador Siddharto Reza Suryodipuro, citing Tehran's seizure last month of St. Peter Evangelical Church, reportedly the capital's oldest Protestant congregation, along with church-owned homes whose Christian families were forced to flee. St. Peter Evangelical Church's confiscation is not an isolated incident, the group said, noting Iran's Ministry of Intelligence recently classified Christian satellite broadcasters as hostile organizations, making even watching or sharing their content potentially prosecutable. The World Council of Churches echoed the alarm, with General Secretary Reverend Jerry Pillay urging authorities to reverse the seizure. Open Doors says Iranian Christians remain heavily and systemically repressed. A University of Michigan hospital has agreed to pay $10,000 to settle a lawsuit brought by a Christian physician assistant fired for refusing, on religious grounds, to take part in gender transition procedures. Valerie Klusterman worked at University of Michigan Health West, also known as Metropolitan Hospital, for 17 years before being terminated in August 2021 for declining to complete training requiring her to use patients' chosen pronouns and assist in sex change surgeries. Under the settlement announced by First Liberty Institute, the hospital will also adopt a policy allowing staff to opt out of actions conflicting with their faith. First Liberty counsel Kayla Toney said, Title VII prohibits employers from discriminating against and punishing employees for their faith. Klusterman said, all I wanted to do was provide the best care possible to my patients without being forced to violate my Christian beliefs. A new Economist and YouGov poll finds American support for same-sex marriage slipping. The survey, released Tuesday and based on responses from 2,500 U.S. adults collected July 25th through 27th with a margin of error of plus or minus 3 points, found 54% say same-sex marriage should be legal, 32% say it shouldn't, and 13% are unsure. That's notably lower than other recent surveys. The Public Religion Research Institute put support at 65%, down from a 2022 high of 69%, while Gallup's June poll also found 65% support, down from a record 71% in 2022 and 2023. Family Research Council President Tony Perkins argues the promise of marriage equality was that nothing else would change, adding, "But that is not what happened," citing pride parades, corporate pressure, surrogacy, and youth gender transitions. Same-sex marriage has been legal nationwide since 2015's Obergefell versus Hodges. Iran's Christians are bearing the brunt of the regime's belief that it outlasted the United States. On July 14th, Tehran's Ministry of Intelligence published a list of hostile media outlets, including Christian evangelical broadcasters abroad, and merely tuning in can mean years in prison. Authorities have also seized Iran's oldest Protestant church, evicting 20 low-income Christian families and telling church leaders they are no longer afraid of America. More than 6,000 people have been detained since the war began February 28th. Convert Mohammed Nikbacht faces execution threats, activist Mary Mohammadi has disappeared, and the Mashhad Evangelical Church was demolished in June. Analysts Jonathan Saye and Samuel Ben-Ur of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies urged the Trump administration to impose global Magnitsky human rights sanctions and finally fill the vacant ambassador-at-large for Religious Freedom post. You can learn more about this story and everything you heard today by clicking the links in the show notes below. Thank you for listening to the Christian Post Daily Podcast. We encourage you to follow the show in your podcast player of choice, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or third-party podcast players like Overcast and Pocket Casts. You can also download the Edify app for free and listen to all the podcasts on the Edify network by clicking the link in today's podcast show notes. We would also appreciate a 5-star rating in Apple Podcasts and Spotify to help us reach a wider audience with the Christian Post Daily Podcast. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter and get the top headlines delivered to your inbox by clicking that link in the show notes as well. Thank you again for listening to the Christian Post Daily Podcast.